All right, hi everyone. This is just chapter 3 review. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the review questions, and I'm also going to go over the case studies, or at least, kind of show you the case study, which sort of quickly, and then you guys can kind of pause as you need to. Remember that the case studies for for all of the chapters, right? Let me just show you that right now. All of the case studies, remember, are in the folder that's marked, right? Unit 1 case studies. So if you then go here and you open up the PowerPoint that says chapter 4 case studies, oops, we're not chapter 4, chapter 3, we're talking about chapter 3, right? Open up the chapter 3 case study PowerPoint, right? You'll have all the information in terms of the information that they're giving you, the background information, and also the questions. Okay, so I'll kind of just show you this. I'm not going to read it for you. You can pause it, read it, and then I'm going to pull up a Word document where I have the answers to those, okay? And then so that you can see them. And I'll talk through it a little bit, but I'm not going to go too crazy because I don't want to make this recording too long, okay? So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to first go over the chapter 3 review questions, and then like I said, I'll go over the case studies, okay? And then that'll be it. Okay, so let me go over the review questions first. So remember, chapter 3, right, was focused on environment, right? Essentially, the effects of we describe different types of hazards that you find in the environment, and then what those effects, those environmental hazards can have on health. All right. So anyway, let's go over this. Why is it? Oh, because I didn't choose it. Okay. So first review question here. Okay, take a moment to read it, pause it if you need to, and then try to answer it first on your own before I click on the correct answer. Remember, these are all in the e-text if you have them, okay? Also at the back of the end of the chapter, there is a summary, and then these review questions are there. The answers to the review questions are in the back of the book, okay? So you can either get them from the e-text like I'm doing here, you can get them from your textbook, and I did tell you guys that I will also probably post PDFs of these and just post them on Moodle in case you don't have the textbook, all right? But let's go over them. We would have, we sometimes do this in class, but if we don't have time, anyway, we're gonna go over it now. Okay, so take a second to read the question, answer the question. Okay, so again, remember, if you need to pause it and read the feedback, that's why I like the e-text version, because it gives you the feedback here. Okay, the environmental health of a community is determined by the social, right, and physical environments. Okay, remember that. And so it's asking you about a public health nurse. Health nurse is assessing the environmental health of a community. Which of the following would the nurse assess? Okay, physical environment being a more general term here. Okay, all right, so moving on. All right, again, take a second to read. Okay, so primary route of exposure of chemicals in the home. The answer is ingestion. Okay. All right, again, take a second to read the question. All right, so why are children more susceptible than adults to environmental disease? One of the reasons is their metabolism is higher. Okay, and they have a greater surface to body mass. Okay, so anything they're going to absorb is going to have a greater effect on their physiological processes. All right, next one. Okay, so if there's elevated lead levels detected in one child, why is it important to then check the lead levels of the other children in the households? Okay, so which of the following statements by the mother indicates that the mother understands the nurse's instructions? And as I told you, the way that these questions are worded are similar to the way the questions on the exam will be worded. Okay, so it's saying which one shows that she actually understands it. Okay, my other children are at risk because they are exposed to the same hazards. Pretty obvious, right? All right, number 5, epidemiology. Okay, what is an example of epidemiology here? Okay, evaluating the effectiveness of measures to clean the drinking water for a town. Okay, so again, it gives you a definition here of epidemiology and a little clarification on it. All right, now we're talking about an occupational health nurse. Okay, which statement indicates that the nurse needs to clarify concepts? So somebody asked this question or somebody made this comment. Okay, choose your answer first. Okay, food in the cafeteria does not need to be protected from airborne contamination. So, you know, remember that these are all the sort of different routes that you can basically be exposed to chemicals. Okay, so food can be contaminated through airborne chemicals or dust that would settle and then be ingested. All right, next one. Okay, so what is she engaged in if she's doing these things? The answer is surveillance. And so I talked about that in the lecture a little bit about, and also like larger scale surveillance, right, of like government agencies and things like that. Okay, so an epidemiologic function of the public health nurse. Okay, evaluating risk factors for asthma in a community. Okay, remember, epidemiology is the study of distribution of the health of a community. The nurse is involved in epidemiology when the nurse evaluates the risk factors for a disease in the community. Okay, so that was all of the questions. So like I said, now I'm just going to switch to the chapter 3 case studies. Okay, so remember, again, in fact, actually, I probably don't need to piece through all these. So let me just kind of like just briefly go through the questions and the case studies that are introduced here, and then I will show you the answers. Okay, so I'm not going to keep flipping back and forth. Again, you all have access to this. Take a look at it, try to answer the questions on your own, and then you can go back and look at the answers that I'm showing you here. Again, I'm not posting the document of the answers because unfortunately, if I use some of these questions on the exam, because we're taking everything remotely, people can copy and paste, and I just don't even want to provide that opportunity. Okay, so that's why I'm doing it this way. Okay, so in terms of chapter 3, I think the case studies are pretty important. And so, one second, let me just make sure. Yeah, okay, it's recording. I got nervous there that I just wasn't recording. Okay, so the first case study is Angela Yang. Okay, so this is pertaining to her 5-year-old daughter, right? It says Angela, the nurse wants to test Angela for received a note from the school that the school nurse wants to recommend that she be tested because of some cognitive difficulties. Okay, her blood test revealed the lead level of 3.7 milligrams per deciliter, which is below the 5.0 milligrams per deciliter blood level of concern. Okay, so again, this is kind of the first test they did was to assess lead levels, and you can kind of think about why she would do that, and it essentially sort of asks you this, right? Discuss a possible reason that may have prompted Angela's healthcare provider to test Angela's blood level for lead. Okay, and then it's going to go on to think about what are some other types of environmental exposures that could potentially lead to some cognitive difficulties. Okay, and so it's going to proceed from there. So again, it's asking you, besides lead poisoning, what environmental health influences may affect Angela at the community level? Okay, so now it's going to go in and give you some more information here, right? So now we're looking at something else. We're looking at mercury levels. Okay, neurotoxicant that's found to some degree in most fish and seafood in the form of methylmercury. And I talk about this in the lecture. Remember, methylmercury is not a natural component of the fish or the seafood. Unfortunately, it's a result of kind of, industrial processes that this gets emitted into the air, and then it ends up settling in the oceans, and then so in certain areas, you're going to see higher levels of this. Okay. All right. So anyway, gives you the mercury level there. Okay, and so now it's asking you about describe the routes of exposure that may have resulted in elevated mercury levels. Well, it talks a little bit about that here, right? Okay. All right, which transport media may be involved in Angela's elevated mercury levels? Okay, so if we move on here, now the physician's going to request that other children be tested, okay, and ask you some questions about that. All right, and again, more explanation here, okay, and then more questions, okay. So there's a lot to read in this case study, so take the time, read through it, and again, this is all giving us different, you know, exposure, sorry for lack of a better term, to you know, to examples of different types of environmental things that can affect health, okay. All right, and now finally outcomes. So again, lot to read here and a lot of extra, you know, important information that's introduced here. Okay, so that's why it is important to go over these case studies. And again, it's not about memorizing here. So for the essay questions, a lot of the essay questions on the exam, I probably will use case studies. Maybe the same ones, probably the same ones. So I could give you the same information and maybe ask you different questions. Maybe I'll ask you the same question, but that are some of the similar questions that are here, you know, but ask you to really kind of define things in your own words. Obviously, it wouldn't be okay to just give me the same answers before, but most likely I'll use these case studies or similar case studies and ask you maybe slightly different questions or what have you, okay? And again, it wouldn't be about memorizing, right? Like I don't expect you to memorize what the normal blood level is for, or the normal blood mercury level is, okay? You would have some information about that and then be able to interpret and understand what that means. Okay, so that's Angela Yang, that's the first case study. Another one here, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, okay? So again, here's the introduction. So now we're talking about a waterborne infectious disease, okay? So we can read about that. And again, here are the first two questions there. And so it's asking you to refer to table 3.1, all right? So, all right. If we go to the next part, again, some more about this waterborne infectious disease, okay? All right, so now it's identified that, that organism. All right, so now it's sort of asking you about different age groups that might be more susceptible. Okay, so think about that information that I presented in the chapter about sort of susceptibility and different sort of special populations or age groups that are more susceptible. We just kind of talked about in the last case study, children, right? Here we can think about some other populations. Okay, again, mentioning surveillance activities here. Okay, if we go to the last part of this case study here, okay, now it's sort of talking about some things that were implemented after this outbreak, okay, and then asking you, well, why did they do those things? All right, last case study in chapter 3 is Richard Mara, okay, so this is a 65-year-old man. He worked in the printing industry and he relocated to a warm climate, okay. All right, so suspecting hear loss, the healthcare provider focused on questions related to lifetime exposures to noise, smoking, alcohol use, and occupational exposures, okay, to neurotoxins. Okay, so again, this is kind of brings up and emphasizes the importance of getting a really good health history, okay, especially when we're trying to kind of determine if there are environmental hazards or exposures that sort of prompted whatever illness you're talking about. Okay, so there's your introduction. More of that introduction here, okay? Asking about what factors in Mr. Mara's history affected the quality of air in his environment, okay? Identify factors in Mr. Mara's occupational history that have had an impact on his health. Most of these things, or all of these things, you can pull out from the information that they gave you. All right, so again, more about Mr. Mara here, okay? So now it's kind of getting at, all right, well, what intervention to limit exposure to these environmental hazards would have the highest priority. So thinking about industrial hygiene, right? And so again, there are positions, you know, or careers where you can be a industrial sort of health nurse, right? Or in charge of an industrial hygiene program or part of it at a large company or something like that. And so these are real kind of issues to think about. All right, talks about PPE. All right, again, just to continue on here, now focusing on his hearing loss. All right, more, right? There's lots of information in these case studies here. So really, again, take the time to read through them. I don't need to read for you, right? So you guys can read through them on your own. Again, a lot of information here. So this is the last part of this case study here. So again, referring you back to something in the text, box 3.2. All right, let me just take a look at what, I believe that's the last one. Last slide here. I'm just going to take a look real quick, just back to box 3.2, just to make sure you guys have access to that. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. So, let me see what box 3.2 is, just to kind of flip back, just in case I didn't show you guys that. I probably did, but I'm not sure exactly what they're referring to. All right, let me okay, I located box 3.2. So again, in case somebody doesn't have the textbook here, I don't know that this is actually in the PowerPoint. I'm not sure, but so examples of industrial hygiene interventions to limit exposure. Okay, so talking about engineering controls here, administrative controls, and PPE. We probably maybe talked about it a little bit, or these are things you could probably maybe could think of on your own, but I just wanted to just refer you guys to that in case you need that to answer the question for the case study. Okay, now last part, again, I'm just going to show you guys the case study answers here, and then again you can pause, you can read, whatever you need to do. So this is Angela Yang introduction, right? Application, and again, these are broken down just like this in the PowerPoint. Angela Yang application, right? So again, if I go back here, introduction. Okay, the first application, numbers 3 and 4, and then 5 and 6. Okay, and then 7 and 8. Remember, this is a really long case study, all the way down to question 11 and the outcome. Okay, the second one, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, right, was about this environmental or microbiological hazard in the water supply, right? So here's the introduction, questions 1 through 2, 3 through 4. Okay, and then the outcome there. And then lastly, Richard Mara. Okay, so this is really kind of, describing or illustrating the sort of effects of long-term exposures, right? And different types of long-term exposures. Did I get everything? All right. It's the outcome, and again, that was box 3.2. I just showed you guys before that it was referring to there, referring you back to. Okay, again, if you don't have the textbook, I think you guys might kind of be seeing how it is very helpful to have that textbook. All right, guys, so that's for chapter 3. I'll kind of run through them just one more time. And again, remember, you can just pause the video wherever you need to. All right, questions 5 and 6. Right, rather than me basically, I kind of went through some of these. And so if you have questions about these guys, be sure, to ask in class, but hopefully with this information, it kind of helps you. And remember, for the essay questions on the exam, there's not really necessarily a right or wrong answer. Even with what's posted here, you probably could answer these in different ways, okay? But this is giving you examples here. All right, thanks, guys.